Welcome to Smallar Solutions. Today we're going to be looking at the Brownells BRN-180. We did a quick sneak peek when it first came out right after SHOT Show this past year. And what we're going to be talking about now is the history and the evolution of the original AR180 to the AR180B to the BRN-180. Now, we're not going to be talking specifically about the history of the AR18 due to the fact that we did a previous video on that. It was called the AR18 AR180, the most successful failure of the last century. And that goes into the military history and the development of this rifle very much in detail. So I'm just going to go over briefly a little bit about the original rifle, and then we're going to go and take a look at the Armalite's AR180B, and then get right into the to the guts of the BRN-180. Now, the rifle that you see here is a original Costa Mesa manufactured AR180. The original video that I did, I was loaned a rifle from a viewer out of Waco, Texas. It was a Sterling AR180. So this one here is one of the original 3-digit serial number Costa Mesa rifles, this is my rifle here. I was fortunate enough to be able to get this from Mark Westrom. Mark Westrom is the former owner of Armalite out of Geneseo, Illinois, out of his personal collection. And this one here we will not be firing. This is a brand new unfired specimen that we're just going to take a look at for as far as from the historical standpoint. The gas system on the AR-180 was developed for several reasons. We go back to the original time of the AR-15 when it was sold to Colt. At that time, not only was the rifle sold, it also included its operating mechanism. Gene Stoner had worked on this operating mechanism, his internal piston, or some people call it direct impingement. He worked on that system, and that was his preferred system. But once it was sold to Colt, he could no longer use that. So to go into the next generation of rifles for Armalite at the time, they had to go back to a different system. So the system that they chose came off of the SVT-40 Soviet rifle, as well as the Gewehr 43, which is an external piston, short stroke piston. So in 1963, right after the sale of the AR-15 to Colt, Gene Stoner developed a rifle that was referred to as the AR-16. Now, the AR-16 was a 7.62 millimeter rifle using a conventional external piston system. And this rifle here was designed very, very different from the original AR-15. It was designed utilizing metal stampings instead of forgings. It was designed so it would be easier to manufacture in a smaller type of machine shop, but you didn't have to have as advanced of a machine shop. In fact, in this rifle here, you can see the spot welds that are on it. You have a stamped metal lower receiver and an upper receiver. So it was designed to be less expensive, easier to manufacture. So Gene Stoner's primary interest has always been 7.62 rifles. He had never liked 5.56. He only went with a 5.56 with the AR-15 because of the request from the Air Force. So the next rifle he developed was a 7.62. Well, of course, with the 5.56 taking off, with the M16 being used, he wanted to develop a rifle that would compete with the Colt AR-15, which is what he did. So the rifle was scaled down to 5.56 millimeter, and this happened to be the last rifle that was developed by Gene Stoner before he left Armalite. Very much so like the AR-15. It was based on, this was designed by Stoner, and then he had his draftsmen and his engineers scale it down to fire the 5.56 millimeter cartridge. And also, this would be the demise of Art Miller at Armalite too, because he was very upset over the lack of success that the AR-18 AR-180 had. Now, when you look at the AR-18 AR-180, there's absolutely no similarities to the AR-15. The parts are not interchangeable. It's a whole new design. The only similarity is going to be the bolt. The bolt is the same 7-lug rotating bolt that's used on the AR-15, and it uses a barrel extension identical to that of the AR-15. But other than that, the rifle is very much its own animal. So what we're going to do is now we're going to take a look at the inside of it. We're going to see what makes this rifle work. Then we're going to take a look at the AR-180B to see the next evolution in 2003, and then to the new BRN-180. Now, looking at the rifle here, we have 3 different magazines. You'll see we have a 20-round magazine, we have a 30-round magazine, and we have a 40-round magazine. The magazines that were utilized by the AR-18 and AR-180 were similar to that of the AR-15 M16. However, there were some issues that came up with feeding, so there were some changes that were made. The original prototype AR-180s, AR-18s, had a magazine that was identical to the AR-15 M16. Now, due to the fact that the magazine would rock back and forth, it would cause failures to feed. So the magazine release was changed over to the right-hand side. The magazine was modified, and you can see that you have a slit on the side here, and you have the magazine release right here. That slit was far more narrower, and it was held in place tighter, and it held it from rocking back and forth, and it corrected those failures to feed issues. The original magazines that came with it did not have the magazine release for use with an AR-15. Now, what you were able to do was to take an AR-15 M16 magazine and modify it so it would work in the AR180, AR18. So basically what you would do is you would make the slit on the right-hand side for the magazine release and mag catch, and then you would grind down the stop notch on the left-hand side so it was flush, so it would fit in the magazine well. So that was by far more common than the actual manufactured magazines. The original magazines that came with the rifles were the 20-round magazine. And then, of course, the 3-round magazine, as you see here, is very unique because this is the original constant curve design that was not used on the AR-15 because of the magazine well. The magazine well is much shorter on the AR-18, AR-180, so it would use more of a constant curve. And then you see the 40-round magazine. The 40-round magazines were manufactured mostly by Sterling. And they were a very good magazine. They're probably one of the few that held more than 20 rounds that worked very, very well. The 30-round magazines were relatively rare. You didn't see too many of those. But those were manufactured in Costa Mesa for the most part. Now, both the 30-round and the 40-round were also cut so they could be utilized in an AR-15. The 20-rounders were not. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the inside. Okay, looking at the rifle, we're going to from the back, we're going to see we have a stock. Now we have 2 pins on the right side here. We push in, and the stock will fold. The charging handle, as you see here, is a crank style instead of a rounded one, which we're going to go back to the AR180B. You're going to see this was changed to the smaller, rounder one. This was relatively uncomfortable. I never really cared for the crank. However, it is the classic design. On top here, you have a scope mount, which had a specific type of a scope mount. There was an optic on here that was identical to the out of the Colt 3-power scope that was used a mount for the AR18, AR180. There was other scope mounts that you could place onto here so you could mount optics. You have an L-shaped aperture with a 100 and a 200 meter sight. As you can see, this receiver is stamped steel, and you can visually see the weld marks that are on there. This is not designed to be a cosmetically appealing rifle. This was designed for functional, for ease of manufacture. That's one of the first things that will come out. You will see we also have if you want to call it ejection port dust cover. Now, this is not necessarily the same as an AR-15 because of the fact that it doesn't cover the ejection port. It covers the slot where the charging handle goes back and forth, and that keeps dirt out of it. And this particular design, very much so like with the AR-15, it's not so much that it will work excellent dirty, is that the way that it's designed to keep the dirt out. You have a polymer pistol grip, the original sling. Now the trigger mechanism we'll take a look at when we take this apart, totally different from that of the AR-15. As you can see on the right-hand side, we have the magazine release. We have polymer handguards. We have front sight with the AR-15 type round front sight post. The barrel we have on here is a standard chrome moly vanadium barrel, chrome plated, with a 1 in 12-inch twist. At the time this rifle was developed in 1963, there was no SS-109 or M855, so this took the same M193 ammunition that of the M16, M16A1. Now the flash suppressor that was on here was very much like the compensator of the M16A2. You did have 3 prongs on here, but the bottom was left solid. What that was to keep the muzzle down on fully automatic, also to keep from blowing debris up, which you would see something very similar come out with the M16A2 when it came out, except for it would be enclosed rather than being prongs. So for disassembly, check to make sure that it's clear. We have on the back here, you'll see a spring-loaded plunger on a lever. We're going to push into that plunger. We're going to push forward, and it's going to break open. As we slide out, we see 2 recoil springs. Now to remove the bolt, we pull back all the way to the rear, then we lift outward on the charging handle, and now we can slide the bolt mechanism onto the back. We have a spring-loaded front pivot pin, which we can push inward. Pops right out. And now we can separate the upper and the lower receiver. Now looking at the safety, we have an ambidextrous safety. Left and right hand side. We have witness marks on the right hand side for safe and fire as well. Here we can see the magazine release. And as you can see, stamped steel. You're able to see the spot weld marks. Trigger mechanism here is totally different from that of the AR-15. It's its own mechanism. The trigger on here is about 7 pounds. It's basically a military grade type trigger. Now you'll see we do have a bolt catch. However, we do not have a bolt release. The bolt will hold open in the last round. However, to release it, you have to manually pull back on the charging handle to let it go forward. So you have a bolt catch, but you do not have a manual release. So now we're going to take a look at the operating mechanism. Now, to get to the operating mechanism, once we remove the bolt carrier group, the operating rod is what holds the handguard in place. Now that this has been removed, we can just lift the handguard right out, exposing the operating mechanism. And again, when you look at the lineage of this particular type of an operating mechanism, it's almost identical to that of the SVT-40 and the Gewehr 43. Now, really, when you look at external piston guns, there's only so many different ways you can have an operating rod and a spring, piston, and a valve. So, there's not really any magic to it whatsoever. So, to remove the gas system, we're going to pull rearward on the operating rod, and we're going to get rid of we're going to pull out the intermediate rod. Going to pull the operating rod right out, and then the piston cup. Now there are 2 gas rings on the spigot here, and you can also see how we have the gas port release in the front of the piston. Now what the gas rings do is it enables to have a closed system, so you don't have to overgas the system. But this creates an expansion chamber between the spigot and the gas valve, so it uses less gas, more efficient, less wear on the rifle. Some of the later generations don't use the gas rings, but as you'll see on other rifles that utilize this system, which we've talked about in the other video, you'll see how many of those systems utilize the gas rings. So that's what you have. You have a simple, durable system, basically a very conventional rifle. And the reason why we called the original video the most successful failure, because this particular operating system, as well as the bolt, are utilized in most all of today's modern rifles, including the FN SCAR, the ACR, the SA80, the G36, the HK XM8, just to name a few of the rifles that utilize this operating system. For the bolt carrier, this is another part that we will see that looks identical on several rifles as well, the modern rifles. You see we have the standard AR-15 type bolt with the 7 locking lugs. So we push inward on the firing pin retaining pin, and we remove the firing pin and firing pin spring. We pull out the cam pin, and we have the chrome-plated bolt. Now, the bolt is very much identical to that of the AR-15 M16, but you'll notice it's missing the rear tail, which encompasses the gas rings, which makes up the operating system or the piston system of the internal piston or the direct gas system. So for reassembly, we're going to drop the bolt carrier back in. Make sure we have the extractor on the right side. I'm going to drop in the cam pin. We're going to drop in the firing pin with the spring. Hold the firing pin in place. Drop in the firing pin retaining pin. And there we have the bolt. Now for reassembly of the operating system, we're going to drop on the piston over the spigot. Drop the operating rod in from the front. You'll see there are three holes in here. 2 for the guide springs and 1 for the operating rod. Pull to the rear. Now we're going to take that intermediate rod. There we have it. Then we're going to drop in top handguard. And we're going to do at this point now is we're going to reattach the upper-lower receiver. Insert the bolt, and we're going to make sure we have the bolt in the unlock position. And once we get the charging handle notch lined up, we insert our charging handle. Lock position. Insert our recoil springs. Push in the plunger. Drop down. And there we have it. In this video, we're going to be talking mostly about the semi-automatic only, so that's what we're going to be talking about is the AR180. Now, the AR18 did not achieve a lot of success. There was relatively few made of the selective fire. However, the semi-automatic only were a little bit more successful. Now, the first rifles were manufactured in Costa Mesa by Armalite. Now, Armalite was not set up to manufacture firearms. They were set up basically as a think tank to develop firearms. So the Costa Mesa AR180 production was about 4,018 rifles. And that was between 1969 and 1972. There were two other manufacturers that were subcontracted to manufacture this rifle as well. One was the Sterling out of England. In the Sterlings, there was 3,927 rifles built from 1979 to 1986. And then Howa out of Japan, which manufactured the most, at 12,362 rifles. That was from 1970 to 1974. Now, when you look at the quality of the rifles, the most highly sought after is what you see here, which is the Costa Mesa, because that was the original Armalite. However, when it came to the quality, was the Howa. The Howas tended to be probably the better of all of them for as far as their manufacturing durability, reliability, and so forth. But the one that has the most value is the original Costa Mesa. Now we're going to skip forward to 1996. In 1996, Eagle Arms, owned by Mark Westrom, had purchased the trademark Armalite and some of its technical data, therefore. Now, Eagle Arms originally was set up, they were manufacturing AR-15 type rifles. And Mark Westrom at that time, he was a retired military ordnance officer. He was working on a 308 as well, around the same time that Reed Knight and Gene Stoner went to work on the SR-25. Well, around 2001, Mark Westrom came out with a new rifle, and it was the AR180B, which is the rifle that you see here. Now, Mark Westrom was very fond of the AR180, and when he looked at building the rifle again, he wanted to do it. He wanted to make it modernized, but you also had to look at the manufacturing techniques and how many would be sold and so forth. So going back and using the original stamped steel lower receiver was just not really an option. First off, the technology doesn't really exist any longer to do it that way. The investment that it would go into manufacturing that was not worthwhile. So the AR180B, as this rifle would be known to be called, had some updates to it. The upper receiver very much held true. The lower receiver is where it was changed. Now, also, we have to take into consideration, at the time this thing was brought to fruition in 2001, there was the assault weapon ban. So what that did was it prevented from having a side-folding stock and prevented from having a flash suppressor, van lug, and so forth. So what Mark Westrom did was he went with a polymer receiver. And the polymer receiver utilized the M16 magazines instead of the original AR18, AR180 magazines. And that's obviously because you have the existing magazines that were available for the M16, which were not available for the AR180. So it was a polymer low receiver. He kept true as much as he could for as far as the look of the original rifle. And some of the modifications were the rear sight. The rear sight was basically a M16A2 rear sight with the same M16A2 long-range and short-range aperture. You do have a standard M16A2 type windage adjustment. You still maintain the front scope mount. So we have a standard M16 type magazine. This particular rifle was on loan to us from Mark Westrom. This is the first one that was ever made. Serial number 0. So we were very fortunate to be able to have this as a sample for us to take a look at. Now, we also take a look at the charging handle. Mark Westrom went with a round charging handle, which is certainly more comfortable than the original crank. He also did not put on any kind of an ejection port dust cover. This was not being designed as a military rifle. This was being designed as a commercial rifle, and there was not really any need for it. That also would have increased the cost significantly by putting one of them on there. Now, we look at the muzzle. Now, This is a 1 7-inch twist barrel because obviously at the time this was being made, the SS-109 or M855 ammunition was available. And he wanted to make the rifle so it would be able to utilize any type of ammunition that was out there. Now, the muzzle brake that you see on here was manufactured and designed as part of the barrel. It was cut. This is not attached. This is part of the barrel. So you do have a muzzle brake on the front, which, it does a decent job for as far as decreasing muzzle flip, but it's also a noise enhancer. You do have your front sling swivel, pinned on front sight base. Now, for this assembly, you utilize some kind of a tool or a cartridge, push inward on the back of the recoil spring assembly, and open up. And as you can see, we have very, very similar dual recoil springs. Pull the bolt carrier to the rear, pull out, and here we have our charging handle. And now we have the bolt. And like the previous one, we do have a front pivot pin. However, this one's held on by an E-clip, so this one will not come apart. We're going to take a look at the bolt carrier first. The bolt carrier is virtually identical to that of the original. Push inward, remove the firing pin retaining pin. And we have the same spring-loaded type firing pin. Same kind of a cam pin. Remove the bolt. And as you can see, the bolt looks identical to that except for it's manganese phosphate coated. And just a little bit more of the modern machining updates of the stronger M16 type bolt. So what we have here is identical. Now we're taking a look at the operating mechanism. Handguard lifts up, and the gas system is identical to that of the original. Pull back, remove the intermediate rod. We're going to remove the operating rod and remove the piston. Now, this version does not utilize the gas rings. That certainly was done for reliability reasons. Unfortunately, when you do that, you do have to have it overgassed a little bit versus the one that would utilize the gas rings. But you wouldn't have to worry about the gas rings ever wearing on the AR180B. Overall, Mark Westrom did an excellent job at bringing it back and modernizing it for use today. Now, just recently, Nodak Spud has developed a lower receiver for this that's aluminum. And they give you the exact same sculpture of the original AR180 lower receiver, utilizing a forging, much stronger, much more durable, and also enables you to be able to put on side folding stock. And those are available from Nodak Spud. Now, another thing we're going to notice in the handguard here is there's no heat shield on the AR180B. And the material that's manufactured on the handguards is a much more durable Zytel that was used versus the original fiberite type materials that you had on the original rifles. So we're going to slide the piston onto the spigot, insert the operating rod from the front, insert the intermediate rod, and there we have the operating mechanism. And drop the handguard right back on. So what we'll do now is we're going to reassemble the bolt. Again, identical to that of the original one. Manganese phosphate. Drop the cam pin in. Firing pin. So we're going to be sure we're in the unlock position. Slide in. I'm going to line up the alignment notch for insertion of the charging handle. Insert the recoil spring. And there you have it. Now, this rifle was only in production for a couple years. It did not have the success that Mark Westrom was hoping for. In fact, he had other plans to make this even that much more authentic after the assault weapon ban. But the rifle did not achieve the popularity. So over the intervening years, you were seeing a lot of the older stuff come back. You were seeing a lot of interesting retro rifles. And I think the timing that Mark had for the AR180B might have been just a little bit too early for the industry for it to swing back to the more classic type rifles. In 2019, Brownells introduced the BRN-180. The BRN-180 was a reintroduction of the AR180 to the commercial market, but it was not to be a complete retro. It was to become a modernized version of the AR180. This was very, very much redesigned. This is not the standard rifle. You'll see there are a lot of similarities to it, but there were some mandates on this to make this thing more modernized. And the most important thing that was done was this was to be placed on an AR-15 lower receiver. There was no new receivers being manufactured for the AR-180, so in order to utilize the AR-15 lower receiver, a lot of work had to be done on the design. Brownells hooked up with Primary Weapon Systems on the development of this rifle. Primary Weapon Systems has a lot of experience with external piston versions of the AR-15. They've done a very good version of their PWS rifle, external piston. They were really a good partner for them to get with to do the design work. So the most complicated part of it was shrinking everything down so it would go on an AR-15 lower receiver. Now, the receiver that we have here, this is a special design receiver that was manufactured by Nodak Spud to give you more of the AR180 look. Now, it is an AR-15 lower receiver. You could drop an AR-15 upper receiver on this, but what it does is it gives you that whole look of the AR-180 lower receiver, but we're using a standard A1 type pistol grip. So, looking at the rifle, we have a modernized rifle. We have the long handguard M-lock, but we placed some nice armament backup sights on there. The barrel on here is a modern 223 Wild. Now, the 223 Wild, according to Primary Weapon Systems, they found it to be the best overall barrel for the 5.56 and 223 ammunition. So Brownells trusted their opinion to go with that, so which is what they did. And basically we have the exact same kind of AR180 three-prong suppressor with the bottom enclosed. So we're going to take a really close look at this, at both the receivers and the upper receiver. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the upper receiver. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this apart and we're going to examine this. So to remove the bolt carrier group, we're going to pull backward on the charging handle, and we're going to pull the recoil spring assembly right out. Very, very similar to that of the original rifle, just a little bit more compact. They stuck with the original crank type charging handle. Pull back to the rear, pull it out, and pull the bolt carrier out. You can see we do have a ejection port dust cover made of polymer. This was one of the parts that they had to redesign a couple times to get it so it would operate properly when the rifle would fire. Now the handguard, we have a locking system right here where we would pull downward, and we can now expose the operating system. As we can see, the operating system is pretty much identical. There are two different versions of this. We have the carbine version, which is the 16-inch barrel, and that utilizes two different gas pistons. The one that comes on here, this is for standard use. The second one comes on there is for use suppress. So obviously it allows less gas in, so the rifle will work suppressed. The carbine or the pistol version or the short barrel version utilizes a gas valve where it's adjustable rather than having to replace the piston. So for disassembly, pull rearward on the operating rod, remove the intermediate rod, push forward, remove the operating rod. Now you can pull back and remove the piston. And like the AR180B, you don't have any gas rings on here. So the lower receiver, this was where it was very, very complex, was just getting this all shortened down so we're working on an AR-15 lower receiver. The bolt carrier, and its design is identical to that to the original. However, again, everything was shrunk down. For disassembly, we utilize a standard cotter pin firing pin retaining pin. Unlike the AR180 or AR180B, you do not utilize a firing pin spring, but you do utilize a spring in the bolt mechanism. We remove the cam pin, and now we remove the bolt. And the bolt has a nickel boron type finish on it, and we do have a spring in the rear. And again, we have a more durable, modern bolt on the BRN-180. So reassembly, drop in the bolt. We're going to align with the extractor on the right. Drop in the cam pin. The firing pin. And insert the firing pin retaining pin. So again, we have a 16-inch barrel on the rifle version, and 10.5-inch barrel on the pistol version, or the SBR version. The upper receiver is 6061 T6 aircraft grade aluminum. So again, we're not utilizing the same kind of forgings. We're utilizing modern forgings instead of the steel stampings. So with keeping up with it more modern, we have the M-LOK handguard, and as you can see, we have the Manta rail panels on here. Now, these were requested by a military customer because prior to this, Manta was only doing the 1913 rail covers. And of course, the direction of the industry is M-LOK, so Manta went ahead and utilizing this exact same material as manufacturing rail panel covers for the M-LOK. And they have that same nice feel to them. They have that same, heat resistant capability. Now, we do have a code for these. It's SAS20 on Manta's website. You can see the code below. It does not come with any kind of backup sights. I had placed these nice backup sights just for test firing purposes. So for reassembly, we're going to reassemble the gas system. We're going to slide on the piston. We're going to insert the operating rod and intermediate rod. We're going to insert the lock. Now, reassembly is the exact same way as the original rifles, making sure the bolt is in the unlock position. So we're going to line up the slot for the charging handle. Now, this is relatively interesting how the rear is held in place. As we insert recoil springs, it's held in by tension. And this is one sole system. This is what enables you to use the side folding stock because everything is encompassed in the inside like the original rifle. Again, looking at the lower receiver, the stock I have on here is a standard SIG MCX MPX side folding stock. And the attachment is manufactured by K&S Precision. That K&S Precision will go into any AR-15 lower receiver for use with this. Now, of course, this is designed for an operating system that is inside of the upper receiver. There's no buffer spring, buffer tube. So that's a K&S part that's on here. And looking at the lower receiver, you have basically an AR-15 type lower receiver. One of the benefits of using the AR-15 type lower receiver is the fact that we have the bolt catch. And with the bolt catch lever on the side, we have a bolt catch as well as a release. On the original rifles, the bolt would lock open on the last shot, but the only way to release was to pull back the charging handle and let it go. You didn't have an actual lever to be able to do that. So that was one of the benefits of going with the newer receiver. And again, it utilizes the standard AR-15 M16 magazines, which, again, these days, there was no point in going with the original one. The original, first time we test fired this rifle, it was utilizing a Santan Tactical with a side folding stock on it. Worked quite well. Standard AR-15 lower receiver. This one was received from Nodak Spuds, and I like this one. This has a lot of really nice looks to it. Now, SHOT Show 2020. Brownells has introduced their own lower receiver for this. They have a lower receiver that has a AR180 look to it, and then one that has a more AR-15 look to it. And those are just being released at SHOT Show 2020, and you can see the photographs we have here of those. And we hope to have one of those to take a look at in the near future. So you do have some options. Now, for those of you who have the AR180Bs and you wanted to go with something different as well, Nodak also offers a aluminum receiver for the AR180B to replace the polymer one. You would just remove all the parts from your polymer receiver and put it into the aluminum receiver, and then you could have your side folding stock on it as well. So there is a lot of interest in the AR180 series, whether it be the new BRN-180 or going back to the AR180Bs and making those more durable, utilizing the aluminum lower receivers instead of the polymer ones for reassembly. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this to the range and we're going to see how this one shoots. Now, the ammunition tested on here was we had 4 different types of ammunition. We tested the Black Hills 55 grain full metal jacket, velocity of 2,941 feet a second. The Black Hills 69 grain OTM, 2,946 feet per second. 77 grain Mark 262, 2,741 feet per second. And the Gecko 55 grain full metal jacket at 3,151 feet per second. Now, reliability was flawless. We had no problems with the reliability whatsoever. Reliability was there. However, the accuracy was, I'll say I was a little disappointed in the accuracy. The best groups that we got were 2.5 to 3.5 inch groups with all the ammunition that we just discussed. This does not have the accuracy of an AR-15. However, if you're using it for close quarters, like you see here with the optical sight, this works just fine. The accuracy is just fine. When you're trying to get groups at 100 yards, you're not getting that same degree of accuracy that you do with an AR-15. The reason why that was, I'm not sure. I actually had 3 of these upper receivers, I had 3 different ones to take a look at because the accuracy was not where where it was supposed to be. And all 3 upper receivers I had, the accuracy, it was virtually the same. There was not really much of an improvement. The ammunition that we were using was the best ammunition. The Black Hills ammunition is the most accurate ammunition in the world, as far as I'm concerned. If your rifle's not shooting well with Black Hills ammunition, it ain't the ammunition; it's the rifle. Now, for as far as a combat rifle, your average quote assault rifle for military use, 6 MOA, 100 yards is acceptable. So we're still well under that of what the standard is, or what the maximum group size is. Now, for a target shooter, for even a close, even a competitor or 3-gun shooter who's shooting under 100 yards, the rifle will do just fine. But for the longer range, the accuracy just wasn't there. Not sure why. I had looked at another one of one of the other content creators I think highly of is Mike Plouffe over at Mr. Guns and Gear. He did a review on this rifle as well, and he got very similar groups to what I got. But for overall, the rifle, it was very, very well executed, reliable, It was certainly combat accurate. It's not an attack driver. It's not that it was supposed to be. So the AR180 definitely is back, and as you'll see if you take a look at the original video, you'll just see the significant influence that this rifle has had on modern-day rifle development. We're seeing other manufacturers coming out with lower receivers and such, so who knows where it's going to go from here with the popularity increasing. Who knows what's next? I know that there's still a lot of life left in this design, and the interest that there is in retro rifles right now. I think we certainly going to see these around for a while. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.